I'm going to be talking about today on nutrition in palliative care. And this will be focused on mainly on renal palliative care and patients who have renal disease. Let's start by discussing what palliative care actually means. So in a nutshell, palliative care is care that improves the quality of life of any patient who has a life-limiting illness. Now, that could be a patient with cancer, that could be a patient with a non-oncological condition, and sorry, just a second. That could be a patient with cancer, that could be a patient with a non-oncological condition, that could be a patient with any end organ failure, and end organ and end-stage kidney disease is part of that. So what all do we do in palliative care? Basically, we provide symptom relief, caregiver support. We try to see how to manage the patient at home, and we do end-of-life care, we do counseling. And in effect, what palliative care does is it brings a lot of streams together. It brings like a multidisciplinary team together to provide the additional supportive care that a patient with renal disease might need. Now, this could include nursing, this could include physiotherapy, this could include dietitian, and this could include occupational therapy, whether it is counseling. All these things are part of the services that palliative care provides. So with respect to this talk, what are the patients who might need palliative care? And some of the patients who may need it are elderly individuals with renal failure, in which who are frail, who have decided not to go ahead with dialysis, who have multiple complications that is hindering dialysis for them. Patients with multi-organ failure, in which renal failure is one of it, and who have considerable morbidity as a result of it. Patients who have multiple dialysis-associated complications and not be possible for them.
I think there is a voice problem.
Yes, it's not audible. Yeah.
Okay, just a minute.
Now you're audible.
Okay.
It was momentary.
Okay. Right. So patients with dialysis-associated complications, patients who have refused dialysis, and patients who have renal failure combined with other illnesses. This may be heart disease, stroke, bedridden patients, cancers, etc. I'd also like to introduce the concept of renal supportive care, which is something that is making a lot of headlines nowadays amongst palliative care and nephrology circles. Who are the patients who will receive renal supportive care? So these may be patients who are being managed on a non-dialysis pathway, who have kidney disease, or they could be dialysis-dependent patients with a high symptom burden. So the point to note here is that it's not that these patients, the patients on renal supportive care may have necessarily refused dialysis or may not be able to undergo dialysis. Even dialysis-dependent patients with multiple symptoms, which need close follow-up, which need a lot of medications, all these can avail of renal supportive care. Some concepts which are slightly different in renal supportive care is that it's predominantly patient-centered. The focus is more on improving the quality of life, on the physical symptoms that the patients might have, and listening to patient preferences and adapting the care they receive according to that. So in a way, it's a kind of specialized care. Also, renal supportive care has a lot of teamwork involved in it. So usually there will be the nephrologist, there will be the palliative care physician or the renal supportive care physician, there will be nursing staff, there will be physiotherapy, dietetics, all of these will come together. So when it comes to nutrition in renal supportive care or in palliative care, we're talking about both of them together now. Where do we start? It's important to first identify what goals of care are for this individual. Do they mean to continue with dialysis? Do they mean to, would they like to stay at home with their family? Would they like to be able to travel? Would they want to have as much of independence in their life and in their physical activities as much as possible? Here is where we begin to understand what the patient wants, and then we communicate with the family. We talk about the patient's likes and dislikes. This could be in the broader sense, and this could also mean talking about their nutritional preferences. Do they have special nutrition needs, like, for example, children or patients with concomitant nutritional issues? Also, in patients like these, we may need to elicit preferences on enteral and parenteral nutrition. It may not be for that point of time, it may be for a time in the future. Because especially for patients with multi-system or multi-organ diseases, or patients with neurological illnesses along with kidney failure, where there is a chance that they might lose competence in the future, it's important for us to know what they feel about getting enteral or parenteral nutrition. So this table talks about dietary requirements of CKD in renal supportive, CKD patients on renal supportive care, and comparing it with patients with CKD, patients on hemodialysis, patients on peritoneal dialysis. Now, if you see, there are quite specific requirements for patients on hemodialysis, patients on peritoneal dialysis, or even in the general CKD area. With respect to energy, potassium, sodium, all of these. But if you look at the CKD RSC bit, the only thing that is really sort of mandated is the protein requirement, and that too, it says later on in the table that it is quite flexible, because a lot of this is going to be individualized. Based on their nutritional status, based on their preferences, based on how their physical functions are. So we may have to see patients who are bedridden with chronic kidney disease, or you may have a patient who is fully active with chronic kidney disease, and their energy requirements are going to be very different. When it comes to serum potassium, this is something which is important because hyperkalemia can lead to acute problems for the patient. But if we're looking at things like phosphate and monitoring phosphate levels, making sure that requirements are in place for them. In some patients on palliative care, they may not have the amount of lifespan left, where we are looking for the long-term consequences of hyperphosphatemia, where we're looking for bone changes in them. So we are not always thinking of 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line. The main problem, the main issues in dietary requirements in palliative care patients comes mainly with regards to sodium, potassium, and fluid. Sodium and fluid, because this is something that is going to cause fluid retention, that is going to affect their breathlessness, and that is a symptom that we are looking to control, especially if they are not going to be on dialysis. So those restrictions may need to be made in order, because they directly impact the symptoms of the patient. Sorry, I can't see it. Just a minute. Could somebody let me stop sharing, please?
Somebody from M&M? Yeah.
Thank you. Now, what are the problems or rather the symptoms that we encounter in patients with CKD? There is nausea, anorexia, cachexia. Some of them may be on RT feeds. There will be fluid overload. They might have intestinal obstruction. They may have change of taste. And when we are looking at it from a renal supportive care point of view, many patients will complain that they have too many restrictions on their diet. Now, how can we look at these problems from a diet point of view and try to change them and try to make them better? Patients who have nausea, we could try giving them bland foods. We could try to avoid skipping meals because that will aggravate the nausea. Avoid strong smells because that will make them not want to eat sometimes. Ginger and ginger products, whether it is ginger tea or crystallized ginger, these things can help with the nausea. With anorexia, small meals, reducing their fiber intake so that they do not feel bloated. Encouraging snacking, encouraging finger foods, and varying the texture and flavor of the foods that they are taking. For patients with cachexia, high nutrition meals might help. For those who have change of taste or a bitter taste in their mouth, soda bicarb mouthwashes. All you need to do is take 1 teaspoon of normal cooking soda in half a glass of water and gargle 4 times a day, in half a liter of water, sorry. Encouraging use of herbs and spices. Cold foods and drink, these can help with patients who struggle with change of taste. Patients with fluid overload, we will look for sodium and water restriction for them. Those who have dry mouth, sour candy or lemons, rinsing their mouth regularly, mouthwashes. And when it comes to constipation, we look at a high fiber diet or fiber supplements and also look at physical activity. Now, when it comes to too many restrictions, through the lens of palliative care, a palliative care physician would be telling you that restrict only if it impacts the symptoms and do not look at patients at the problems that might happen 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line. So these are some SAQs I'm sure that we all must be hearing. He doesn't eat anything. Can I give her protein powders? In here, we also have to consider the psychological aspect, the social aspect of the patient, of the family. Is there anything else they're trying to say? Are they trying to communicate their worry more than anything? And so over here, this is where the power of counseling comes in. And everybody, I think, can work as a counselor as part of their daily job, whether it is a doctor, whether it is a dietitian, whether it is a nurse. Everybody has the ability to listen to the patient, listen to their worries. And through that, we may be able to help them just allay their worries a little bit. When we talk about nutrition at the end of life, we are thinking about the final weeks of life. What physiological changes will occur at this point of time? There will be a reduced desire to eat. Patients will not want to eat. There will be a reduced physiological need for nutrition. So this is where families panic. Feeding is something that is so important to families, to loved ones. But as a dietitian or as a member of their medical team, it is important for us to talk to them about the importance of comfort here rather than nutrition. Because we are looking at the final few days or weeks of life, all we're trying to do is to keep them comfortable. So we avoid force feeding, avoid forcing them to eat. All we do is prioritize enjoyment of their foods. So what it is that we could just make a few things that they like. And even if they just have a spoon or two of that particular meal, that's fine, because all we're trying to do is to help them enjoy whatever their favorite food was. And it's important to reassure families because they will be very worried about the fact that their food intake has drastically come down. So talking to them in a way to say that his or her requirement for food, for nutrition has reduced. And he does not require as much nutrition as he used to previously. And it's we need to respect that. We need to not force feed them. So some food of thought before we move to our take-home messages. when we look at patients who require palliative care, we think more about their short-term implications. We think more about how this will impact their symptoms today, tomorrow, or a few days down the line. We don't worry as much about long-term implications. We don't think about what this will mean to them a few years down the line. As the speaker prior to me has also spoken about this, the social aspects of eating, being there with the family at the table while food is being served, that might encourage them to eat. Just the simple act of sitting at the table with the family, or sitting at the table at a party with friends over, these things might encourage them to eat. I would also encourage you to think about how families would appreciate a rationale for dietary advice, and especially when dietary advice is changing. If we are thinking about changing goals of care from a therapeutic to a palliative pathway, how they would appreciate the fact that we are changing their nutrition goals accordingly. And then think about, what does food mean in our society, in a family life? It means love, it means care, it means bringing the family together. And so food really has so many other implications apart from nutrition. Then we can think of the physical function and the psychological status. How does it impact appetite of a person? A patient who is depressed, would they be able to eat as much as possible? A patient who is sedentary as compared to one who is mobile, how will that impact their appetite? Somebody who has suddenly become bedridden, what will that mean for them? So I think I would like to finish just with some take-home points. It's important to be flexible in these patients and communicate exactly what it is that we plan to do, and more importantly, what it is that is in their minds. Restrictions only if they impact the patient's physical or psychological well-being. This can include psychological factors, and this can include their symptoms. Following up to assess comfort with their dietary plans, and to support patients as dietary restrictions are changed. What most patients on palliative care feel is an abandonment by the medical system. They feel that their doctors have abandoned them, their hospital has abandoned them, they've just told them to stay at home. And that is not true. We need to explain to them that these dietary restrictions are part of the medical care that we are giving them. Remember that renal supportive care is patient-centered, and that you are part of their journey and not vice versa. And I'd like to end with this quote from Atul Gawande, that we think that it is our job to ensure survival, but more than that, really, it is to enable well-being. Thank you.